Hello watch lovers, welcome back to the channel. My name is Stian and today we have this lovely old Tudor Oyster on the bench. This is a 1959 model, reference 7934 with a Big Rose logo. See the dial in the hands look fine, the case has gotten some punishment over the years and the bracelet as well, and it's quite some stretching in the bracelet. The watch does run, and it runs fairly okay in horizontal position, but that changes quite dramatically when we put it in vertical position. You see the beat rate is also much too high, and we're going to see what we can do about that. It's been a while since I've published a video, so you're getting a lot of stuff in this one. We're gonna do the bracelet. We're gonna fix the hairspring, we're gonna repair the movement, and of course also polish the case and the bracelet. I already took off the bracelet, and now we're trying to find the right die for taking off the case back. This is of course a Rolex Oyster case with those ridges, and then we have to use a special die for taking the case back off. It's good to use this kind of tool, and the risk for slippage is much less. And this type of case back, you should not be able to get it off with just a rubber ball. Inside the case we see an off-the-shelf movement, basically. An ETA 1156. And that is a good lead-in to the story of Tudor. Tudor was of course founded by Hans Wilsdorf, the founder of Rolex, just after the Second World War. And the whole intention was to create an affordable alternative to Rolex, but with the same build quality. So of course the crown has a Rolex crown, the dial, case, everything is, well, let's say the same standard as Rolex. But then the movements were off-the-shelf, cheaper movements. Now that all changed around 2010. They started rebranding, came up with models that more or less compete directly with Rolex and are getting quite expensive also. And they even started making their own movements just, I think, in 2015. But this watch does exemplify that early mission of trying to make high quality watches with off-the-shelf movements. So there are some issues with the hairspring. We're going to get back to that a little bit later and how we deal with it. And we see there's also a lot of slack there in the barrel arbor bearing. So this reference, together with a few siblings, are often referred to as the Big Rose, of course because the dial has a big rose on it. The very first Tudors that came out actually had the rose, the Tudor Rose, inside the shield. And then of course in the late 1960s they stopped using the rose logo on the dial and started using only the shield. And a lot of people, me included, do prefer the rose logo. Tudor now uses the rose on the crown on a few models, but that's basically it. The shield has taken over, also on the crowns. They don't use the Rolex crowns anymore. So the disassembly of this watch is pretty straightforward. It's only got 3 hands, no complications. So far the only issues we've seen is the hairspring and also the barrel bearing in the barrel bridge. So we'll see if there's any more gremlins around here anywhere. The shock settings are the KIF type. Good shock settings. Not quite as easy to work with as Inca block in my opinion, but in Norway we say that tastes are like the butt. It's split in the middle. We're putting the balance back on for cleaning, And then we can also take off the shock setting on the balance cock. Now, gremlin number 3 coming up. Inside the barrel we have the mainspring. That is the power source of any vintage watch. And this one has also seen better days. But hey, nothing wrong with that, huh? According to my wife, I've seen better days as well. And by the way, when she made that comment, I very wisely chose not to say anything. So we can see that the mainspring has quite a lot of kinks, and yeah, I'm not sure what happened to it. Maybe someone... All right, doggy. Man. It's like the dogs have a barking competition. I think there are 2 criteria, loudest and longest. So far they're pretty even. So before putting the movement into the cleaning machine, we're gonna clean the pivots quickly with this stick called Eve Flex. And then we're also gonna peg the jewel holes. Alright, there we have it. Simple movement, so not too many parts. And that mainspring we're gonna donate to the cylindrical archive. Let's then get the rest of the movement parts into the baskets, and then we can put them in the cleaning machine. So for those who are curious, yeah, you're kind of nosy, aren't you? Like, you have to stick your nose into anything. Didn't your mama tell you that's not nice? Anyway, I'm using those tiny little baskets for the most fragile things, like the wheels, like the jewels, shock settings, those types of things. And then I'm using the bigger compartments for the bigger parts. The cleaning machine I use is quite nice. It's automatic and it's very gentle. So the parts aren't going to rub against each other, and you're not going to really risk damaging the parts in a cleaning machine like this. And yes, I have promised a workshop tour to some people, and that's coming up before Christmas. So while the cleaning machine is doing its job, let's turn our attention to the bracelet. We see some of these links are pretty stretched, and there aren't really any really good options for fixing them. You simply have to unfold them and then basically open the whole bracelet and then tighten the pieces and put new pins in between them. So that's what we're going to do. We're simply going to bend up these links, and then we can take them out. We're going to have to do that for every single link in the bracelet. So yes, that is quite some work. And then later we're going to polish the entire bracelet. The finish on this bracelet is relatively simple. It's all brushed. Most bracelets will have, for instance, the center links polished and the side links brushed, just to create some variation. This one is thankfully simple that way, but there are a lot of links and pins to remove. And the construction of this bracelet is also a real gunk trap. So this mix of DNA and skin and hair and what have you is really getting trapped inside those folded links. Before we get into tightening the links, let's get them all through the ultrasonic at least once, maybe twice, maybe 17 times. And then we add just a pinch of sugar and 1 garlic clove. Let me also take this opportunity to thank my members, both on YouTube and Patreon. Couldn't do it without you guys. Thanks so much. And if you're interested in getting more in-depth videos, specific types of repairs videos, that kind of thing, then check out the join button below or this link on Patreon. So I said before starting the bracelet work that there are no really good options for fixing it. And what I mean by that is that we cannot fix it in situ. So we have to take all the links apart. And then of course when trying to reduce the gap, we risk distorting the overall shape of the link. So that's why you saw me using that brass piece there inside the link to maintain the shape of the link. So after doing this kind of work to reduce that spread, we then have to put in new pins as well. And then of course we have to tighten them so that the new bracelet or the revised bracelet becomes a bit tighter. For this second part here, we don't push the pin fully in. If we do that, then the center link might not fit in between. This steel piece we're putting in here actually holds the entire bracelet together. So in each separate link you have one of those pieces. And after putting that piece in, we can then put another pin sort of on top of that piece, so that the piece is held between 2 pins. That makes the whole bracelet sturdier and kind of keeps it together. And after then building the whole complete link like that, we can then finally press the pins completely home. So again, not a perfect way of doing it, but hopefully the outcome becomes better than it was. Turning then to the movement, we got it back from the cleaning machine. We're first going to epilam the escapement parts. Epilam is a stearic acid that leaves a very fine film on the parts. And that film then helps lubrication stay in place better. It's not a must, to be honest. If you're starting out doing this type of work, then don't worry about it, don't bother. But after a while, when you've done this a few times, then it does help on the lubrication. And then we can put a tiny drop of thin oil in the center of these capsules. That reduces the friction a lot in the balance, which is the part, of course, in the watch that rotates the most. For this kind of watch, the balance rotates about 500,000 times every day. So it's keeping busy enough. And of course, if you have too much friction, then the watch itself will be not keeping time as well as it should. Now, turning to the hairspring, we saw there was an issue. It wasn't so easy to spot before, but we're going to take the hairspring off the balance, and then we can see it a bit better. Still not easy to see, so let's zoom in, and there we have it. You can see at the 9 o'clock position there are 2 coils much too close to each other. What we do then is we find, let's say, the root cause of the problem, and then we slightly and very gently bend the hairspring at that point. And then we can get the coils parallel again. Now another issue here is that the collet is not entirely centered. It's a little bit too much to the left in the images. So to fix that, we're increasing the angle of this shoulder where the collet pins the hairspring. And then we have to gently bend the coils back. A bit tricky to do this under the camera, but ultimately we'll then also get the collet nicely centered. To try to find the position where we should put the hairspring back on the balance again, we can put the balance without the hairspring, but under the cock onto the main plate. And then we'll line the impulse jewel up with the pallet fork jewel and the escape wheel jewel. And there we have our position for the stud. For this balance it's quite easy because it has timing screws, and we see that the stud point aligns pretty perfectly with one of the timing screws. Otherwise you might have to make a little mark with like a marker or something and then clean it off afterwards. And with that we can then put the balance with the hairspring back in the cock. Always make sure we get one of the coils in between the index pin and the boot. And then let's see how the balance oscillates. We are of course going to put in a new mainspring. Remember the old one was pretty kinked. When we buy new mainsprings like this, they come lubricated from the factory. Thin layer of Teflon. And most of the time the colored face of that ring holding it is the one that should be up, but not always. So we always need to check the direction of the winding. And then we can commence with building the rest of the movement again. It is a straightforward movement, so we don't have to talk too much about rebuilding it. One thing to note is that this movement does have center seconds implemented in the old style way, making a lot of extra height to the movement. So to try to counter that, the center wheel is under the barrel. There was, however, another issue with this watch, and that was that the barrel bridge bearing was a bit worn. So we're going to close that hole by using our staking tool with a domed stub and the domed stake. And then we put our bridge in between them and prepare our watchmaker's sledgehammer. Hammer time! Yeah, pound it to oblivion. Really? That tippy tap sort of makes me doubt that anyone ever referred to Hulk as the Green Watchmaker. Anyway, so we deliberately closed the hole a little bit too much with our staking tool. And then we use a smoothing broach to open it a little bit again, and also then to basically harden the metal around the hole a little bit. Before building the rest of the train side, we're going to put in this cap jewel for the escape wheel. And we can oil the escape wheel from the inside or underside, if you will. Straightforward movement for sure, but good quality. And it looks pretty nice as well. Kind of looks like an Omega movement with that copper plating. So one of the benefits of having small children is that you do get some insights every now and then, pretty profound ones even. So the other day my 7-year-old daughter, she was looking for some pages to print out in color, because she likes coloring. And as we were looking at like unicorns and bunnies and what have you, all of a sudden this really profound insight just popped up among all the images. It said, not all pee-pee times are poo-poo times, but all poo-poo times are pee-pee times. And I had to double check the source of that because it's brilliant. So I was expecting either Confucius or Einstein. But it turned out to be just a poop emoji. Anyway, we're over on the dial side, putting together the keyless works. Also fairly straightforward on this watch. So all these little posts will have a wheel rotating on them, so we're putting a little bit of oil there to reduce friction as well. So basically everywhere there's metal rubbing against metal, we put a tiny little bit of lubrication to reduce the friction. One little thing to look out for in the keyless works is this intermediate winding wheel here that meshes with the sliding pinion. That one typically has this beveled edge that goes down so that it meshes better with the sliding pinion. There are exceptions to that rule though, so if you can, try to find the manual or the technical communication for the movement you're working on, and then it will say there. So I mentioned that Tudor has really reinvented themselves over the last decade and a half. They're really trying to create their own identity and their own brand, and become more than a lower cost alternative to Rolex. What do you think of Tudor as a brand nowadays? Let me know in the comments below. We're almost done with putting the movement together. We're now at putting the winding parts together. So the click and then the ratchet wheel. And also here we do put in small amounts of oil or grease for that sake, to make sure that these wheels spin as freely as possible. There's also a really good habit to always try what you're putting in place, like here, and making sure that this crown wheel does mesh with the underlying parts on the dial side. So we don't just screw it down without checking that first. And then we can put in the pallet fork and the cock. And then we're almost getting ready to put the watch on the time grapher. We're going to lubricate the pallet fork, but we first let the balance or the whole watch run for a couple of minutes first, just so we rub a little groove in the epilam. And then we place a tiny little drop of lubrication in the center of the pallet stone, and then let that spread over the escape wheel teeth. And yes, we are talking really small amounts of lubrication here. It is a common gripe for watchmakers and watch repairers that lubricants are so expensive. But then again, a 2 milliliter vial lasts you for like 5 years. So, alright, then we can finally put the balance in for good this time. And that's nice to see. The balance springing into life. Before putting it on the time grapher, let's just lubricate the remaining jewel holes. And then we're also going to demagnetize it first. So we're absolutely happy with the horizontal position. 0 beat there is just luck. But we see there's still a bit of discrepancy in the vertical positions. So the way we do that is by simply manipulating the hairspring a little bit in situ. And yes, we have to go back and forth and do this quite a few times, but eventually we do manage to get a very steady beat also in the vertical positions. So that's nice to see. Then we can put on the dial and the hands. First, of course, the hour wheel. The dials on these old watches have a couple of screws that go into the dial feet. The dial feet are basically just a couple of small rods of brass or nickel sticking out from the dial. And then they are screwed into and keep the dial in place. It's a very nice dial, I must say. It does look like the hour markers are actually plated brass, which is a little bit of a shame. They should have used metal that doesn't corrode that way. But that's the way it is. Dials are extremely fragile and difficult to do anything about. So obviously we're not going to try anything on that. I do, however, have a couple of videos in the pipeline where we refinish the dial. So then we can see at what level, at least I believe, that the dial is too badly damaged to do anything about. That's for later though. For now, let's finish putting on the last hand, the very nicely blued second hand. Let's also have a quick look, or actually rather a slow look at the second hand moving. Because this is an old movement with a low beat rate of 18,000 beats per hour. That means 5 beats per second. And if we slow it down a little bit, we can even count those beats. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 beats per second. Most modern watches have typically 8 beats per second, some even 10 beats per second. And then of course the second hand will move much smoother. Alright, let's now turn our attention to the case. We'll first take out the crown tube gasket, and then we can unscrew the crown tube from the case. To do that, we use this tool. And yes, there is a tool for everything, especially in watchmaking. Inside the crown tube are a set of small teeth that then mesh with this tool. Makes it very convenient to unscrew the crown tube. We of course also have to polish the bezel, so we took that off along with the crystal. There's actually not a lot of gunk or anything on the case, so that's a good thing. A little bit of surface rust there that we can quite easily remove. And after getting rid of the worst parts with the pegwood, we can then go to the ultrasonic. Alright, after cleaning the case and the bracelet in ultrasonic, we can then start taking out the worst of the scratches. Mind you, this is an old watch, so some of the scratches and nicks are too deep. We would have to remove too much metal if we try to make everything go away. So we have to be a little bit respectful to the history of the watch. But we can take out most of the scratches and nicks. So we're doing this in both the case, the bezel, the case back, and the bracelet. And after we've taken out the worst scratches, we can then brush the bracelet and the face of the case again afterwards. The case back on this model is completely flat and should be mirror polished. So for that we're going to use our lapping disc. I placed the case back on this piece of wood with a double-sided very strong tape, and that gives me a little bit extra control. And then we're also going to use a couple of different grits on the disc. And that will take out the worst nicks and scratches. There are still a few left, but that's just how it is. The case back has an engraving with the reference number and the serial number, and of course we cannot take off so much metal that we destroy those. To get the high luster, we then use these mops with a very, very fine polishing paste, and that brings out the shine. The bezel is also completely flat, so the side of it is entirely flat. So we're also going to lap that one, and to make sure we get the correct angle, we use some marker, Sharpie, and then we test the angle until we rub off all the Sharpie. And then the same thing here, we start with a little bit rougher grit to take out the scratches and nicks, the worst of them at least. And then we use a finer grit to get a bit more of a polish. And then the last step, as before, is to use the mops to get the high luster. Shiny, my precious. Last step then is to put the brushing on the case face, and then I use a Scotch Brite cloth for that. Alright, time to put everything back together. We have our case, we have our crystal. I'm actually reusing the old crystal here, but before the owner gets the watch back, I'm going to put in a new one. I mentioned before that what watch brands do in terms of finishing is to always try to create some contrast. For this watch, the main contrast will be the polished bezel versus the brushed case face, and then also versus the brushed bracelet. So that's something we'll see in a few moments. For the crown tube gasket, we're also going to lubricate that one a little bit with some silicone. That helps the rubber stay supple and smooth for longer. I'm using a piece of wood here so that we don't damage the gasket. That's very easy when you use metal tweezers. And then we can finally case the watch. So the movement has this spacer ring made of metal, thank God. Really hate seeing plastic spacer rings. When we took the watch apart, we had these two clamps. They are blued on top. Well, at least I think it's the top, but when we took them off, this blued side was down. But it looks nice, I think, so I'm putting them up. They are flat, so there's no angle that is intended to help press the movement in the right direction. So we are free to use the blued side up. With the gasket in the case back, we can put the shiny new case back on. As mentioned, there are a couple of deeper marks that we cannot take out without removing the engravings, so we're not going to do that. But it still looks pretty good, I think. Almost a black polish. And with the bracelet on, we have the watch ready to wear. Before seeing the watch on the wrist, I just want to remind everyone that at vintagewatchservices.eu you'll always find more than 100 beautiful vintage watches. And as a subscriber you can get 10% off. And there we have it. A wonderful 1959 Tudor Oyster. Now a little bit refreshed. It's a very stylish watch, I think. The bracelet is a bit small for me, so I had to cheat a little bit, but hope it will fit well for Amy, the owner of the watch. I hope you also enjoyed this video. If you did, then clicking like and subscribe will really help the channel. I'll be back with another video shortly. Until then, ta-ta.